often what I'm finding now is I've got, using the dentist as an example, they're probably working 10 hours a day seeing clients, and then they're still fiddling around trying to do lead gen. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, because unless you have spent years studying this stuff, you don't know how to do it. And I think that that's the biggest area where people are falling down. And I say to them all the time, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Are you a corporate escapee and wasting valuable time attempting to figure challenges out on your own? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you firsthand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day. We get real with no corporate BS. And now, over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome, Sonya Keenan from the Omni-Channel Media Group to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by Build, Live, Give. Welcome, Sonya.
Hi, Paul. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you as well. So what I'd love to do is start off with something that your family or friends would know about you that we wouldn't.
I'm a scuba diver. Love that. And as a child, I collected Smurfs. Still have them, 100 of them.
I've got to say, I had a couple of Smurfs as well. Which
one of those Smurfs of mine's now worth over £1,000, I found out recently. So, wow. Yeah, they're still all in a little box upstairs. So, yeah, there you go.
I always joke that my actual wife looks a little bit like Daisy. So,
oh, really? Is she blue?
No, she's not blue, but she's got blonde hair and, yeah, very similar traits. And who was your favourite Smurf if you had to pick one?
I had this windsurfing Smurf, which I still have him, but his windsurfing's not that great. He was my favourite. But the valuable one that I have is Spaceman Smurf, because he still has his little plastic dome on his head, and he lives now very securely inside a paperclip container so that he doesn't get squashed. But yes, I love animation. I actually have a collection of cells from The Simpsons, like original ones that were used, as well as Mickey Mouse, the Warner Brothers franchises. I've got an original 1967 Fred Flintstone from the movie. And once again, I think my family think I'm mad, but they're just something that over the years when I see them around, I don't do it as much now because they've become very expensive, but sort of 20, 30 odd years ago, they used to just throw them out, or they used to wipe the drawings off them with some metho and draw again. So that's something probably not too many people know about me.
No, that's great. And I know you've had a very extensive corporate career, but why don't you just take us through your corporate escapee story?
I grew up in a family of small business owners. I vowed and declared that I wouldn't be self-employed. I'm on the record of saying a few times, my father used to always say being self-employed means being unemployed every Monday. And I think my dad was probably, back in the 70s and 80s, an entrepreneur before the word existed. And I watched, though, how he struggled financially. We were lucky that Mum had a really good, solid job, and so we could sort of run the ebbs and flows of Dad's business, and there was always something else he had to invest in. And so I sort of stepped back from it. I started my first sort of study was arts degree in photography. I was going to be a commercial photographer. Due to a whole lot of reasons that didn't happen. And in the meantime, I'd started working for him part-time while I was at uni. And from there, he used to do a lot of work in the shopping centre industry. And from there, I picked up a job as a shopping centre. We were called promotions managers in those days, in, of all places, Rockhampton. And ended up spending sort of the best part of 20 years in Rockhampton. Absolutely loved it. But at the end of the day, also couldn't wait to get out of there. But it gave me an incredible experience through a couple of different industries. I moved from the shopping centre industry into the media industry, particularly into newspapers, and started in sort of newspaper advertising management, and then from there ended up working more on the readership and circulation side. And that was my first understanding of how people consume content. We're sort of talking in the 90s, as Google was just this sort of fledgling search engine, and it fascinated me. I could see then, this digital thing was going to be just incredible. And from there, sort of kept my fingers in with it all the way. Through that job, we were one of the first newspapers in the world, one of our newspapers actually back in Rockhampton, to do a full PDF downloadable, searchable version of the newspaper, and that was the Rockhampton Morning Bulletin. And It was so we could send it out to our farmers in remote areas who used to have to wait 2 days to get the paper sent to them. We could send it out, but of course it was dial-up, so they'd have to sort of turn the computer on when they started to go milk the cows or go herd the sheep or something, and then come back in at smoko and they'd be able to read their newspaper. So I was just fascinated by the technology. From there, I ended up in property development, working with Lend-Lease, and then my final corporate role was with Mirvac as a sales and marketing director within their built, what was called built form, so apartments and houses and things like that, working in Sydney. And for a whole lot of reasons, they and I decided that, the relationship was over, and it was sort of like, you're not the right fit for us anymore. And had been extremely successful. We had done close to $1 billion worth of sales in the last year that I was there. But, I got caught up in a political stoush of different managers and just ended up being on the wrong team. But thankfully, part of that going away was a reasonably healthy check and enough money to set up my own business. And I was really fortunate at the time. I had a mentor through a formal mentoring program, and I was talking to him about it. He said to me, "You don't want to go find another job. You need to just go and work for yourself." He said, "You have got so many skills. You're a qualified photographer." By then I had a master's in HR and marketing. My undergraduate was in accounting and marketing. I loved numbers as much as I loved creativity. I loved digital. One of my last roles with Mirvac was we effectively launched a whole building from a very basic sales office, but did the whole lot digitally. We created, different ways of presenting the product via iPads and projecting images of rooms and all sorts of things, long before this was the norm. It used to take us about 12 months to build the sales office to launch a product, and we did it in about 3 months and sold out the whole project in the first weekend, 300 and something apartments in Chatswood, just by demonstrating the product digitally as opposed to having to have hard, cold surfaces for people to touch. And it just showed me, if you work with the content, if you get that message right and you hit the pain point, the purchasers of these particular apartments were primarily young Asian people, migrants that had moved here to Australia. So technology was something that they got. And so they didn't need the security of what probably a more middle class, older market might have needed. And so digital has been at the front of everything basically since I started my business in 2010, that was. Have had a business through that period, publishing business that I ran with Deborah Hutton called Balance by Deborah Hutton. And we've launched a couple of other platforms, particularly targeting women over 45 and working with major advertising companies that wanted to communicate with that market, but not in an advertising way, in a very much an information, value and advance sort of way. And that project led me to America. We did an event over there. And while it was a one-day event, and to justify the trip for one day, I just found a conference to try and make it worthwhile. And it happened to be Digital Marketers Traffic and Conversion Summit. I had never heard of them. This was in about 2013 or 14. And rocked along to this conference thinking there'd be a few hundred people. And there was I think in those days it was about 1,800 people. And from there, I heard Ryan Dice's keynote, his opening keynote that day, and went, wow, I've found what I referred to as my church. I had this guy who was standing up there talking about all the things we'd been doing just sort of intuitively, but he was giving me a vernacular for it, and he was giving me a structure for it, and this whole idea that as businesses, no matter what business you're in, you serve a solution to a pain point. And if you can't define that, and if you can't demonstrate that, and then if you can't help the customer solve it, well, you won't be successful. So from there, went on to become certified partner, the first one outside of America for digital marketer. Started working with Infusionsoft because I understood the power of automation So while we don't do a lot of implementation anymore with Infusionsoft, most of my clients tend to use it or something similar. Discovered Donald Miller, have become a certified guide with Donald Miller. I think his story brand mechanism for helping businesses define their story and get that pain point right is one of the best I've seen. And so my business has evolved more now into a coaching business. A lot of
brilliant. And look, I'll ask you a couple of questions because that's an amazing story and amazing background.
I'm very old, Paul, so it's a very long story.
No, that's fine. It's only you're only as old as you feel. And
yes.
but what I'd love you to do is go back to 2010 for a moment and just was it easier or harder than you anticipated? Given certainly your father's background and what you'd experienced as a child, was it easier or harder to start your own business?
It was harder, I think. It was before I did it, when I finished with my corporate career and I was really unsure what to do. I was talking to my brother about it and I said, I just don't think I want to go into my own business. I just don't think I can. I can't do what Dad did. I just can't live that life. And my brother and I are both business people, and he's been in real estate all his career. And he didn't really say much, and we sort of finished the conversation. Then about a half an hour later, he phoned me back and he said, there's a big difference. And I said, what's that? He said, you're not Dad. You're going to do that. You're going to do it different. You're not going to make those same mistakes. You're not going to run it you don't have to run the business like he did. You're going to do it different. And I think that's where I was fortunate that I've had, all the way through while being in corporate, I've also had small businesses. I've had retail businesses. I've had cafes, function centres, all sorts of things that I was in partnership with other people with or involved with. And so I understood small business. I knew how to do it, but I also know how hard and how lonely it can be. And the big thing that changed it for me, I think, was my first team member that I employed. So a woman called Megan Houston, who's been with me. She worked for me in corporate, in a couple of my different corporate roles. She was in my team. And then when it was time to launch my business, I said to her, I knew she wasn't happy where she was. How much would it take for you to come and work for me? And she gave me the figure, and that was the first contract that I got. Was
right. And what did she do for you at the start? So
she was sort of content, back of house, sort of a lot of the stuff we did for Balance by Deborah Hutton, a lot of the publishing side. She came from a PR journalistic background, was very interested in digital. And so she's still with me. And we've through that period of time of working with me, she's had 2 more children. And she's scaled and descaled her hours with me all the way through, but she gets me, and that's been important. And now that the business is growing more, that's been the big thing that I've had to learn is my job's to be the leader and the conduit to pull in what we need to do, and then I need to let my team do it.
Yeah, and look, I think that's such a valuable lesson. And I know, looking back at my corporate career, definitely that was something easy to do because I had lots of people. In Coca-Cola, you're always blessed with having so many people. But I think in small business and, as a thought leader, you often struggle with that because it's all about you. But I think the businesses that do scale, it's pretty simple, are the ones that can let go. And, I've got a fantastic team now sort of dispersed around the world. And with my health, it forced me to do that. But I think that is a great skill. Now, what we'll do is go into the build section, which, you've sort of set it up beautifully. But, when someone asks, hey, Sonya, what do you do today? How do you answer that?
I help small business owners understand how to make their businesses grow. That's basically all I do. And I do that through helping them take the information they've already got and turn that into knowledge. I believe that one of the biggest barriers for business owners today is there's just so much information and they're completely overloaded and they don't understand how to apply it. And there's been this, I believe, miscommunication that just because you're really great at being a dentist that you should be really good at doing Facebook ads. And I don't think that's the case. You should be really good at being a dentist and you should be able to tell someone what you want them to do to create you really great Facebook ads, and you should understand what they're doing and you should understand what you're spending your money on, and you should definitely have the passwords to absolutely everything you do. But should you be doing that? And that's where my coaching really does work on, first of all, helping business owners create a brief so they can actually articulate to somebody else what it is they want done and what their expectations are on the outcome of that, both in what it will do, how much it will cost, how much time it should take. Once they can do that, well, then they can start to grow. But often what I'm finding now is I've got, using the dentist as an example, they're probably working 10 hours a day seeing clients, and then they're still fiddling around trying to do lead gen. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, because unless you have spent years studying this stuff, you don't know how to do it. And I think that that's the biggest area where people are falling down. And I say to them all the time, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so my coaching is very much focused on how can I give you the skill sets to be the leader of your business so that you can then articulate to whether it's an internal team, an external team, or an external contractor what it is you want done to grow your business.
Yeah. What are some of the key elements that you think people often miss in a brief?
First of all, expectations of what it is they think it's going to do versus the budget that they have. People come to me and say, I need to build a website. Yeah, great. Well, what do you want that website to do? And, they've got all these things, they want it to sell products, and they want it to do bookings, and they want it to, and you go, yeah, well, how much budget have you got for that? And they go, oh, my friend told me that they got a friend to build a website on Wix and it cost $500. I'm like, yeah, well, it's not going to happen. How much income do you expect to generate out of this? And they go, well, it's going to run my business. Well, your business turns over, $500,000 a year. Do you really think you want to put the shop front of that business, you're going to only spend $500 on it? No, really? This is your shop front. This is the first thing people see about you when they Google you, when someone recommends you to be the person to fix this pain point, and they Google you and they go to this thing that your mate spent $500 doing. Is it really what you want?
And as a rough rule of thumb, let's say it's a $500,000 business. Most of our coaches and consultants at the top end are doing that. What percentage should they be spending on marketing? And I mean both consultancy and spend. What's a rough percent that you think is reasonable?
Depending on where you are, if you've already got a database, obviously it starts to drop down. But I would be, if you're turning over 500,000. I would be expecting that you should be paying somewhere between 8 to 10% of that turnover in broad marketing costs. So that could be a coach, it could be implementation, it's those sorts of costs. The thing about websites particularly, and anything to do with digital, is once you've built it, it's not finished. It then has to be maintained. That's the thing that people also don't understand is, we live in such a dynamic environment with digital now that an API link that worked last week, all of a sudden a website does an upgrade and it doesn't work again. Well, you need a developer who's doing support for you that's on top of that stuff all the time. A couple of weeks ago, WP Engine moved all their WordPress sites over to PHP environment, which meant every website, if it wasn't already compliable to that, had to be upgraded. Now, for some websites, that people have come to me about, they hadn't upgraded their WordPress for months, years, and all of a sudden it's not working. So, you need to look at it and say, well, if I've got a business that's turning over $500,000 a year, my average customer is worth $1,000 to me. How much of that $1,000 would I be prepared to invest to get a new customer? And if all you're doing is digital, what is that? And it might be that, it's $1,000 a year, using the dentist as an example. It's $1,000 a year is the average spend of a customer. But if I keep that customer, they're going to be worth a lifetime value of $25,000.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, if it costs you $500 to get that customer, even if it costs you $1,000 to get that customer initially, if you keep that customer for 25 years, it's a very cheap investment. And that's where the next stage of it that we work with our clients a lot on is retention. How do I focus on lifetime value of a customer? What's happening in the digital world is more and more people are getting better at the cold traffic and doing a churn, getting new clients, but they're not working on how do I excite them, how do I retain them, and how do I then scale them to improve the lifetime value of the customer.
Yeah.
And they're the sorts of conversations that we have.
Great. And I'll ask you just Two quick questions on both leads and then retention. So on leads, what are the things that you see at the moment that are the key hot buttons to help small businesses grow from a leads perspective?
Number one, and it's been the same even back in my newspaper days, is you have to be able to very quickly articulate what it is, the pain point that your product or service solves for the customer. It is not about you. You are the guide. The person that you are trying to get to buy your product is the hero. They want to understand how you are going to help them. Even if you're selling T-shirts, what is the pain point that T-shirt solves today for that person? You've got to hit them with that. Otherwise, they're going to tune out. It's no longer should your face be the first thing that people see on their website. They need to see themselves. They need to see that they've arrived in the right place and that you have empathy, understanding, and the authority to fix that pain point. That's number one. The other big thing, the number of websites who have no call to action. They don't ask their customers to do anything. Stick a buy now button on there. Stick a contact us button on there. But they're not interested in, your team and all that other stuff that people put above the fold. They're just interested in fixing their pain point. And you will improve your leads and your conversions by just doing those two things. Great.
And retention, what are a couple of key things you're seeing working well for small businesses with retention?
Communicate. But the communication needs to be about them, not about you. People aren't interested in your newsletter if all you're doing is telling them that, Mary in your office had a birthday. They're not interested. They want to understand how you're going to fix them and why your email is interrupting them today. With the digital marketer, we use this platform called the customer value journey. And it's all based into these different quadrants that you send your customer through the journey. And straight after conversion is a box called Excite. And most businesses think that's for them. They think that means I'm so excited I got a sale. No, it's you got to make your customer excited about the decision they just made to buy that T-shirt or book that dentist appointment or book their dog into the kennel or whatever it is you're doing. And then explain to them how they'll get the most out of the relationship with you, and also then offer them other services that may help them get more out of that. The best upsell that a business can have is any form of premium project, help me get there quicker, do it for me type service, anything like that might add an additional sale, whether that happens at the checkout or whether it happens throughout the course of the year. Most businesses don't do promotions. No matter what type of business you're in, you should have some promotion at least 6 times a year. If you're the dentist, do a discount on teeth cleaning. Come up with something that encourages people to want to come back and buy from you. The hardest sale you will ever make is the first sale. Once they're confident with that and they trust you, they'll keep coming back. But you've got to be in front of them. Don't ever assume that you have sent the customer that before so they already know about it, because they don't. They're not thinking about you. In this world, nobody thinks about anybody else. They're thinking about themselves.
Yes. Yes, so true. I used to, when I was in marketing at the Coca-Cola company, there was a guy that came out from the US and he said, look, this is how much time you spend thinking about your brand. And he basically had the head full of Coca-Cola. And then he said, this is how much our consumers spend. It was like a speck. Like, don't ever get those proportions wrong. And it's always resonated with me, which, supports your point.
It's a great story. With the Coca-Cola one, the only time the customers ever think about you is when they're thirsty and they happen to be standing in front of a fridge and there's a Coca-Cola. If they're a bolted on Coca-Cola drinker and every time they drink Coke, well, then, of course, that will work. But there's very, very few companies that have that relationship with their customer.
Yeah. Brilliant. And look, some great nuggets there. What about for your business? What's your business going to look like in 3 years' time from now?
I don't know, Paul, because I would never have thought 3 years ago it would look like this. We have morphed from a publishing company that did some implementation work for people through to now primarily a coaching business with supporting events. So we run some smaller workshops throughout the year, and then we have our flagship event in August this year. It's going to be on the Gold Coast again, called DMDU Connect, Digital Marketers Down Under. And it's all about building a community. And I just believe that Australian and New Zealand business owners shouldn't have to travel to America to tap into the world's best practitioners. And so that's been a big passion of mine. And, I never saw myself as an event company. I still don't. But it's a big part of our business now. So I think the beauty of the internet is it allows us to pivot very easily and move into different markets, which we're doing. My big goal over this next sort of probably 12 months to 2 years is to start understanding how I can help more people with my coaching, with more sort of self-help type programs, because a lot of people just can't simply afford my coaching program. They're just not at that level. But so we've been working on that. And yeah, I'm not sure, Paul. I have now decided you just sort of, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months for me is probably as far as I look.
Yeah.
And then let it just go where it goes. It's I'm doing a lot more traveling, a lot more speaking at events overseas. So that sort of thing's important to me. I've worked out the power of connecting with people. I'm not a great networker. I'm actually quite introverted. I find I do all this stuff because I have to. I find it sometimes quite taxing, so I don't actively seek it out. But through the communities I'm now engaged with, I do tend to sort of come across a lot more people. And, it's the old, Sonya, can I just pick your brains for 10 minutes? And I'm quite happy. People just pick my brains and I help them where I can. And, from my business, it's amazing how you can have a conversation with someone at a TNC, 12 months ago, and then out of the blue they contact you and say, I'm ready for you to be my coach now.
Yes.
So yeah, it's I help a lot of people. I do at every event I speak at. I make an offer for people to send me the one idea they're going to implement, and then I'll follow them up. And at a TNC a couple of weeks ago, I've got I think ended up with 200 people that I've been emailing over the last couple of weeks, just helping them, move to that next step. Just do one thing and then do the next thing. So yeah, I'm not really sure.
And your biggest challenges, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face today in running your business?
I think, like most business owners, cash flow it is been a big one for us, with obviously running such a large-scale event. It's a lot of cash you've got to put out, and managing that. I've got a lot better at it. I got some help with it to be able to plan better. I remember about 18 months ago being in a position for the first time since I'd been in business that I was looking at my bank balance and I had enough money there to pay the bills for the next 3 months. And I realised how creative that made me. So yes. I've tried to maintain that. So that's been a big one. I'm lucky I have a very stable team. Even with I've got a couple of VAs that I have working for me out of the Philippines. I think the average tenure there now is 3 years. So I'm very fortunate there. The coaching business in my own self is not scalable because it's just me. But, somebody said to me the other day, well, why do you have to worry about scaling it? It is what it is. But it's how I build things around that potentially are scalable or will maybe have something that as an exit strategy down the track I could potentially sell or bring in a partner or something. So working on those ideas at the moment. But probably always in that learning space is where I'll always be.
Okay, great. Well, before we go into the next section, I'd like to mention my daily posts on actionable content for corporate escapees on LinkedIn. So just search Build, Live, Give, and you'll see me as an employee. Connect with me, and please let me know as a listener through your personal connection request that what podcast you listen to, and any feedback would be fantastic. So the next section is the live section. So what are some of the daily habits that help you be successful, Sonya?
Planning. Number one, I'm a list creator. So every week on a Monday, I do a list of all the core things that I have to get done this week, the things based for clients that I have to do. Then those things get transposed to the days of the week, and I work from there. My partner says to me that I'm extremely disciplined about it, and I have to be. Otherwise, next thing you know, you're upstairs spraying the aphids on the plants at home. You're not doing the work. My schedule is a little bit different because most of my coaching clients are overseas now. So I tend to do calls very early in the morning and then give myself a bit of a break in the middle of the day. That's been a big part of me being more productive. Systematizing things, critical. If you're going to get other people to do something, you have to create a system and you have to be able to explain it, and then being able to know how you check the plan's working and if necessarily how you realign it. So yeah, it's all about systematizing to be successful, and that comes back to planning. It's
Great.
just.
And you mentioned Iris, your partner. What would she's listening right now? What would you like to say to her about the support she's given you through this journey since 2010?
She's never second guessed me, which I think probably sometimes would have been hard with some of my ideas. When you say I'm going to run an event on the Gold Coast, by the way, I have to pay a deposit of $30,000, 6 months out. It's a bit scary, but has never second guessed me. And even to the point this last year, she decided to really understand what it is I did, and so she's completed all the digital marketer certifications that we offer. She decided she wanted to do them, and so she's done all of them. She's probably more qualified than I am now when it comes to training. And she's picked up her own little social media clients that she manages. And Iris is 20 years older than me, so she's in her 70s, and I just think that's awesome. And she gets what I do now. She understands why it's frustrating and how hard it can be to do the sort of work we do. So support and no judgment and interest, I think, is probably the three things that I would say have been the most amazing part of our partnership.
Brilliant. And the next section is the give section. So what's a community that you support and why?
I have a few things that I do in my private life, but in my business life, it really has come back to helping business owners. So I do that two ways. One is the event. The event on the Gold Coast last year, we had over 700 businesses there. It's a massive event, but it means that all types of business owners can tap into the quality of speakers that normally you have to hop on a Qantas airplane and go to America or Europe to hear. So bringing things here that makes it attainable for other people to get that information so they can turn it into knowledge. And then, as I said, out of that, I have a lot of people that I help with the businesses just because I can. They're not paying clients, and there's people that maybe aren't there yet, or they need help to get to that next level, and just being a sounding board, reviewing things for them where I can, and steering them in the direction of the right people to help them. Being in your own business can be really, really lonely. And I think for a lot of business owners, just knowing that they've got somebody that they can have a sanity check with is important. Mental health for business owners is a massive issue. There's a big, takes a big toll on you when you feel like your business failing is you failing. And I ask people to disconnect the two. One's got nothing to do with the other. A business can fail for a whole lot of reasons, or an idea can bomb for a whole lot of reasons, but that doesn't mean anything about you as a person, and you have to pull them apart. You have to see yourself as a business person and the private person, the family person, the friend. They're two very, very different things, and we have to give ourselves permission to do that. Even when you're at that bootstrap stage where you're working, 12, 16 hours a day, your back's out because you're so huddled on your computer and everybody hates you because that's all you do, you've got to step back. And I can tell you, be far more creative when you can step back and look back in as a real person as opposed to a business person. So I tend to have a lot of those conversations, Paul, with people.
Yeah, no, look, I completely agree. And, that's why I run masterminds for corporate escapees for the exact same reason. I spent 5 years trying to work that out all by myself. And, so difficult doing that. I was just constantly trying to reinvent the wheel, whereas, I finally found a mastermind. It helped. I've done the same thing. So, if you're listening there and you are, thinking that failure of your business is due to you, it's probably not that. Like you said, there's many factors, Sonya, but probably the most important one is that, there's certain things that work really well. And once you get those and you follow those, you will have success. And I think just the ability to go out, reach out, find your right community, whether it's Sonia's community, whether it's mine, just find your right community and get help, I think makes a big difference. What is it? Heavy lifting, more hands, whatever that saying is. I think, it's so important to do that. So look, the last section is the action section. So what I'll do is just ask you some quick questions and get some rapid fire responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 productivity tips?
A bit like we talked about before, it's planning, it's systematizing, and it's being able to communicate those systems and know how to check back in on them. It's the only way. You cannot become productive until you actually can define what it is you're trying to do and tell somebody else.
Great. Excellent. And some of the technologies you use to run your business, you mentioned Infusionsoft before, but what other things do you use to run your business?
I'm still very email-based. If people want to communicate with me, email is my preferred. Zoom has become a massive part of my business now. WordPress, I really believe that it's still the best platform for most small businesses for that sort of technology. And as you said, Infusionsoft for me personally, but with my clients now, I tend to also see using more and more of tools even like MailChimp because they're cost effective. So it's a pretty basic tech stack. I think people get too carried away with it. I think some people try to make it overly complicated, and I try to keep things as simple as possible.
Great. And what about some podcasts or books that you'd recommend?
Podcasts, big podcaster. Love Perpetual Traffic on Digital Marketer. I listen to that all the time, just the snapshot of what's happening. I'm a Silver Circle member with James Shrimko and love his podcast as well. And also James's book. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Who else? Amy Porterfield is another one that I listen to quite a lot. And then books. Oh, so many. My favourite recently was the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Beep. I think that's a good start for most people. A book I read a million years ago that I still pull out is The Experience Economy, which was well before the environment we live in now. But this whole idea that people buy experiences, not products, is still as relevant. And then the life-changing book for me, and once again, I still read it pretty much every year, was The 1 Minute Millionaire, written by the 1 Minute Manager guys. And it was basically built on the premise that there is no limit on success, and me helping you be successful does not interfere with my ability to be successful. There's no quota of millionaires at any one time. And so I live my life that way. I believe that if I help others, that they will become successful and they'll help others, and we'll all get there just a little bit quicker. And most times it works out pretty well. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, look, we'll put all the links in the show notes to everything that you mentioned today. There's been so much wisdom you've packed in. And my last question is, what impact do you want to leave on the world?
I think as we move into this sort of time we've got this aging population as well as this incredibly savvy young population coming through, that the power of particularly the digital economy to allow people to take control of their lives, whether it's as a young person learning how to sell things online that they don't actually have to go and pull beers in a bar, they can actually run a business on the side while they're studying, through to people my age who realise that, at 45 or 50, they've got to work for another 20 or sometimes 30 years and they want to do something they love. That is the secret of youth. If you are doing something you love, you will stay young, you will stay engaged, you'll stay vibrant, and you'll keep learning. And that's the fountain of youth, is learning. Wanting to learn new things and apply new things and being challenged means that you will always have a youthful way of looking at the world. And so that's what I hope, is that more and more people at both ends of those of the equations with their career, the people just starting and the people that are coming to probably the end of the high-powered part of their career, understand that there are other options and they can take them and they exist, and there's communities out there. You said it before. It's about, I believe, I refer to it as finding your church. You need to find the church that you like, the evangelistic approach that you connect with, and stick with it and learn it and implement it and then grow from there. But we live in a time of so much opportunity. And I think that as we start to understand that more, I think that it will help people as we become an aging population and people are really starting to work out what the hell are people going to do when they're 120. They'll be, the generation coming through now will probably still be running businesses when they're 100.
Yes.
It's scary.
Yeah, well, if Peter Thiel gets his way, you'll never die. But
yeah, I don't think I can't imagine that. But at the same time, if you can keep a mind that's actively engaged in learning, I think that, and even if it's not business, go on Babbel and learn a language. There's just so much you can do to keep yourself engaged and connected into the world. And I think that's what stops people from getting old of mind, is connecting.
No, look, great advice. And you can find out more about Sonya at omnichannelmediagroup.com. We'll have the link there. And, check out her event in August. It's fantastic for small business owners looking to grow. So I highly recommend you do that. But Sonya, thanks a lot for coming on the show today.
Great. Pleasure to be here, Paul.
Thank you for listening to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by Build, Live, Give. If you would like to join a community of like-minded peers, please visit www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening and be brave.